Hello and welcome to another episode where we're going to be talking about the Zimbabwean constitution. This is what we talk about here. We are going to be talking about the constitution until perhaps we all are experts at this. I am not a lawyer. I am just a Zimbabwean who is looking for different ways of engaging with our laws, with my fellow citizens, with the government itself, elected officials, non-elected officials, everybody. Wherever you are, you're Zimbabwean, you're a stakeholder. This is just me trying to figure ways of increasing the discussions around the constitution of our nation. This is a journey, and I hope by the end of this journey, we will have some kind of idea about what it is that an ordinary person can do to use the tools of the Constitution to their benefit, to protect themselves, to protect, I guess, the authorities, to protect the officials, to protect children, to protect the land, to protect animals, and to help create a more united nation in a bid to continue on this prosperous journey that we are on as a nation. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about the rights, when our rights clash with national security. Who wins when that happens? And I'm sure you've heard of many a time an official comes up online, something goes down, there is some growing dissent somewhere, there is talk about a protest here and there is talk about something that officials view as a threat to national security. They drop the words national security. There has been incidents where some officials have actually gone on to say, well, if you are a threat to national security, then we are going to deal with you in a way that results perhaps in serious injury or even loss of somebody's life. But what is it exactly that determines what is a threat to national security and what is not? Are our elected leaders throwing the term around to protect their power, or they are legitimately telling the citizens that this is indeed a threat to national security? But as a citizen, you also need to understand and be aware of what the supreme law of the land, as presented in the Constitution, what it says about that which is taking place at that particular time, the words coming out of the government officials, and vis-a-vis the actions that are being undertaken on the streets. Are you breaking the law? And if you are, you ought to stop. And if the official is breaking the law by uttering those words, they ought to stop as well. There is nobody, according to the Constitution, who is above the law. It's the supreme law of the land, and nobody, no matter who they are, is above that supreme law of the land. So if we familiarize ourselves with that law, then we know how to apply it, then we know how to frame our arguments, or the departing point of our argument, if we have to take it to perhaps the courts, if we have to perhaps push back, and then we can create this discourse, a healthy discourse, which is based in the Constitution, and what the Constitution allows for each and every one of us to be able to do and to not do. So the national security, I'm very fascinated because there are so many times that it has been invoked by the leaders of our nation, and it seems as if it is just that one phrase that then puts an end to whatever argument you had or whatever grievance one had, and had to express their grievance in the way that they had planned to, whether it's a planned demonstration, whether it's a planned stay away, whether it's planned, whatever it is, we have even seen actions being taken by the government to show force that whatever the plan is, whatever the planned demonstration will be met with a force, with serious force. Because, and in the past, we've seen they were called black boots descend on people. We have seen the riot police being called upon people, water cannons used. Just in the before Zimbabwe in Rhodesia, they would use dogs, police dogs that are sicked on the people. They also used water cannons. They used quite a number of things that we are still using in modern days, in present day Zimbabwe, modern day Zimbabwe, whatever you would call it. It is correct, I think. So national security seems to be that one catch-all phrase that actually stops everybody dead in their tracks. It is a serious phrase, very responsible, and it just is a one stop everything that you're doing, drop it down because now you are a threat to national security. In addition to that, you are not supposed to question the authorities when they drop that phrase. They are the law themselves unto themselves now. They're suspending your rights, they're limiting them or taking them away, or even just holding them in abeyance and disregarding them because something of more importance is at stake, and that is national security. But so many a time, people have actually thought that this was used as a ruse to prevent people from showing their dissent, from expressing themselves, their rights, as provided for in the Constitution. When national security is dropped, everybody is supposed to drop it. Whatever you're doing, stop it. Because now it's time for your rights to be limited. It's time for your rights to be put in suspension. So it seems, because they will be serious when they mention national security, these government officials. So there are now three things at play: what the politician or government official says, what the police say, consequentially after that, and usually we know those two branches of government work together. And the third is it strikes something within your heart, within your being. It strikes fear, and your fear then tells you, based off of what has happened in the past, when people try to take similar actions, what happened to them is what is being threatened to you now. So now you have to suspend your activities and slinker back to your hideout and complain, mumble, punch the wall or something, but just don't bring that back to the fore, because it might cause more people to actually want to join in, and you have more rules and regulations and laws thrown at you, incite public uprising, public violence, and other things like that. So there are so many of these things that are used, but some of them, to be quite frank, are used to keep people in check. And of course, there might be some of them that are called legitimately, but it's the courts that have to decide that have to arbitrate and figure that out, that, well, with the application of the Constitution, the politician was correct, or the citizen was correct, or both were correct, to some varying degree or the other. However, ultimately, the most important, the Constitution decides. When we hold the Constitution to the action, to the words, then this Constitution will then decide what is to be said, what is not to be said, what actions have to be taken, and what actions have got not to be taken. So we need to really familiarize ourselves. And it's not only for lawyers to know the Constitution. Me and you have to know it, but to the extent that we can understand it, then the lawyers, the judges, and other scholars will then help us even further our knowledge when we seek them out, when we seek their opinions. I would like to see opinions written out in newspapers, in the daily newspapers, in the Chronicle, in the Herald, in Newsday, opinions on pieces of legislation, the Constitution, books written about the Constitution, um, you know, and we can read, we can analyze, we can deepen our knowledge and then apply it. And imagine if the entire country knows the Constitution very well, if the entire political group of people, class, knows and understand the Constitution, the do's and the don'ts, then we have a thriving country. We have a country based off of respect for this Constitution, which then provides for the respect for different offices that people occupy, and the people who are the citizens, the general people, who will know how to engage with their elected officials and when to call them out and how to call them out, how to praise them, when to praise them, so that things don't get out of control. So this actually makes me think that if we know the law, if you and I know the law, if our elected officials know the law, any behavior that is outside of what the Constitution says, it's inconsistent with the law, and therefore it's illegal. It doesn't matter who's doing it. It doesn't matter who's doing it and in whose name or under whose orders that person is acting on his behalf. If they're doing something that is antithetical to the Constitution, that goes against, then it is illegal, and the people have to call it out. We have to bring the writings and say, your action went against this, and therefore that it was illegal, and we can seek the recourse. We can seek recourse, the courts, the judges, so help us judges, and God as well. So having said that, I would like to think that national security is important, and it's very, very essential for a nation to be safe. You, me, our leaders all have to be safe. And national security is there for all of us, not just a few people. But it doesn't mean that national security has to be invoked and then people's rights are put in abeyance. No, there has to be limits. There has to be within reasonable limit that people's rights are put on suspension or even limited periods of time. Not every time power or the powers that be feel threatened without any reasonable judgment, without any reasonable basis, then they bring it out. It's now right here in the breast pocket to use, to fetch, to just grab like a cigarette. It's not supposed to be used that way. It's supposed to be, people are supposed to deliberate in deep thought, consideration, deliberate on it some more, then make the call. And it must operate within the frameworks of our Constitution. So in other words, national security is not just a blank check. It is something that comes with so much consideration that by the time it is actually announced that this is a national security issue, there has been some thought that went behind it and some consideration for what the supreme law of the land actually says. But there is also this: rights can be limited. We have rights, but they most certainly can be limited. But then this is now where honesty is required, and honesty matters. Where do we get our rights? When do we get our rights? And who gets their rights limited? In what situation? To answer this, Section 86 talks about how these rights can be limited. And I'm going to read just a little bit about it. And then that's not just the only thing that the Constitution talks about, because there are some rights that cannot be limited. So before you despair, hear this out. Then we'll look at the other non-degradable rights that we all have. Section 86 talks about limitation of rights and freedoms. The fundamental rights and freedoms set out in this chapter must be exercised reasonably and with due regard for the rights and freedoms of other persons. The fundamental rights and freedoms set out in this chapter may be limited only in terms of a law of general application and to the extent that the limitation is fair, reasonable, necessary, and justifiable in a democratic society based on openness, justice, human dignity, equality, and freedom, taking into account all relevant factors including nature of the right or freedom concerned, the purpose of the limitation, in particular whether it is necessary in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, morality, public health, regional or town planning, or general public interest. It reminds me of the episode we did, the previous episode to this one, where we were looking at the land issue, where land, agricultural land, may be taken by the government, but there are considerations that have to be made for that land to be taken. So it's the same thing again when it comes to the limitation of the rights of the people. These are the considerations I've just read, but then there are some non-degradable rights that are contained in section 86(3). These are the right to life, human dignity, to not be tortured, to not be degraded as a human being, to not be subjected to cruel and inhumane treatment, to have a fair trial, which is you have to have your day in court. You have to be given the right to be represented and tried, given a fair trial, and to not be a slave. You don't have to be enslaved by anyone. Zimbabwe, the Constitution says that. So if there's any of you out there that are being held as slaves by whoever it might be, feel like you are being held in slave-like conditions, feel free to reach out to the courts and present your case that, hey, I feel like I'm being enslaved here. I feel like I'm being treated inhumanely. I feel like I didn't get a fair trial. I feel like I've been tortured and other things like that. It doesn't matter whether the torture was for political campaign. During campaigns, we've heard certain people who get all too enthusiastic for their candidates and wanting them to win, that they can go a little overboard with their support and hurt others. But we have a history of that as a country. I'm not saying it's happening today, right now, but we have had that happen, and so many people were seriously hurt, and some even lost their lives due to this. And all these were constitutional breaches. All these were illegal things that have to be perhaps brought up, and the aggrieved parties be heard in court, by the courts. So what we've discovered is that the Constitution does allow for rights to be limited. But as I said, do not despair. There are considerations that have to be made before that right is limited. The limitation has to be fair. It has to be reasonable. It's something that's necessary in a democratic society. And the right has to be, the suspension or the limitation has to be necessary. And at the same time, it does not have to destroy the essence of that right. So there is a lot of thought that goes into this. Whenever there is a call for limitation of rights, there has to be so much thought that goes into it, so much deliberation and re-deliberation and thinking again, so as to not really bring harm to people and traumatize people when it's not really necessary. Perhaps just skip it. Don't make the call. So what we have just discovered contained in our Constitution is that a right can be limited, but it cannot be erased. And it cannot be limited just arbitrarily. It has to have, there has to be so much consideration before that right can be limited, right? And this is not me saying that this is what the Constitution actually says, allows us to know, so that we can, in fact, if you're right, if you feel like your right has been limited, or your right has been, you've been prevented from exercising your right, then you can read it up and bring it up and say, hey, Section 86 says that these rights shall not be degraded whatsoever. I have to have these rights at any given moment in time. What's happening? Why is this right being taken away from me right now? And who has given the authority, who has given this person that's doing so the authority to take my rights away? Have we changed the Constitution or not? So those are the things. Knowing the Constitution can be our tool of perhaps having a more fair discourse as a nation, and more careful approach as we deal with each other in our everyday lives, as we engage with public officials, we engage with the so-called government. We know where we're coming from and the basis of what we're bringing up. Then if somebody chooses to not engage and perhaps act outside the provisions of the Constitution, then we stand and look at them like, hey, this is blatant breaking of the law, and what's up with that? Then, and hopefully it doesn't happen. Hopefully we all get the answers that we want. We all treat each other the way that we have to treat each other in a nation of laws, rule of law, law and order. So we see a lot. I mentioned earlier about the black boots, riot police, riot gear. When I say those things, some people actually, unfortunately, have PTSD in their mind. They have these flashbacks, severe memories of unpleasant things that happened to them in the past, or that happened to their loved ones. And as a country, we shouldn't be having that in our midst. Of course, we should just know that we have to respect the laws of the country, but at the same time, we also should not be brutalized for trying to exercise our rights. So the Constitution also it talks about this. It provides for protections for the people from the lawmakers, and also from security forces. They are bound by the same laws, by the same Constitution. So they are not supposed to really be acting willy-nilly, going out of their way and brutalizing people or threatening people or preventing them from exercising their rights. Section 44 of our Constitution, that talks about the duty to respect fundamental rights and freedom, and it's addressing the security forces. Security forces in Zimbabwe are some the most respected and feared by the citizenry. They usually, when they have to and when they need to, they can quell, situations that perhaps could get out of hand, which is good. But also sometimes they could just be heavy-handed, dishing out, button sticks and sometimes shooting at people. Not always, and it's not something that's in the nature of our security forces. But there's also many other stories where, when we grew up, we were afraid of security forces doing very, very bad things to you. If you did go against certain individuals in our nation, you would be met with a very painful time. You definitely would be treated. Perhaps you would be denied your rights, and it was something that we were made to accept and understand that it is acceptable to be mistreated by security forces, especially if they were acting on behalf of the people that occupy the higher echelons of our country, and they could act with impunity and hurt people without any recourse or repercussions coming their way. So Section 44 actually does make a provision for us, for everybody, that the state, the police, the military, intelligence services what they are supposed to do is to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill rights. So you heard that, right? State, the police, the military, the intelligence services, all they have to do in their service for the nation is to protect people, promote their rights, fulfill rights, respect people. That's their obligation as stated by the constitution of our country. And they do not have the power to suspend the constitution. They too, like us, like me, like you, like everybody else, they too, security forces are part of the people, entities that are subject to the constitution of Zimbabwe. They have no power to suspend it whatsoever. So anyone that comes around and say they can, that is not quite true. They do not have to. So a lot of us are familiar with this now. There's a pattern when rights are broken or abused. So usually they do this by teaching by example. The unfortunate character gets used as an example as to not what to do, especially when it comes to exercising our rights. So somebody will go out, exercise a right, the powers that be take notice, they feel threatened, then security, state security is involved. Immediately after, limitations are placed on those rights, on that person's rights. By this time, maybe they would already been violated. And you see it before, even when there's a plan, a whiff in the air of, well, somebody is planning to exercise their rights. Social media today, we see government officials, elected officials, and non-elected cabinet members, or whoever they are. They are quick to go and write up, you are not supposed to do that. How dare you? The moment you do that, you will face the full wrath of the law. But what law are they talking about? Isn't it the same law that governs their behavior the moment they set to write those threats? Isn't it the same law? So, who has more rights than others? Do public officials hold more rights? Do they deserve more rights? Not according to the Constitution. Everybody is under this supreme law. Everybody has the same rights, and nobody else is supposed to limit another person's rights, no matter what. So that's the pattern of the abuse of rights by public officials. And there are so many other people laterally in our community, in our society. We abuse each other's rights all the time. People degrading other people treating others like slaves, people, the right to life, denying other people the right to life. So with public officials, when that fear has been communicated and, the person has been made an example of, or a group of people, then the fear gets widespread. And that prevents propagation of people wanting to practice their rights. The courts are sidelined. Courts, most of the time, are made to be redundant, really, for one reason or the other, which we shall talk about later when we get to the courts section. So when that happens, when people come out and try to curb other people's rights or prevent them from exercising their rights, the Constitution sort of had it in mind. The makers of the Constitution knew that this would likely happen. So that's why they said that for any person's rights to be limited, there has to be considerations that include the fact that there has to be proportionality, there has to be a justification, and there has to be accountability on all sides, on the person doing the suspension or the limiting of the rights, and on the person whose rights are being limited. There has to be consideration, a fair view and assessment of the entire situation. Because security, once it's involved national security, we've known people scramble for shelter, because what comes after that invocation usually is not a good sight, and it's not something that the human body can withstand. Human psyche cannot withstand that. So now, like I say, the reason I'm saying there has to be accountability is because security without oversight, it's chaos. It just gets out of control. So next time, people, whenever you hear somebody invoke national security, oh, you cannot do this, national security this, national security that, quickly find out which right is now going to be limited. Once that's been said, what is the right that's being gone after? What's the right that's being targeted? Is it under the law, that invocation? Is it lawful? Has there been a fair assessment of the situation? What are the scholars saying? What are the constitutional scholars saying? What are the law people saying? What is the judiciary saying? What is everybody else saying? What are all the parties included in this? What are they saying? And is the curbing of the right, the limitation of the right, is it fair? Is it proportionate? And also, can it be challenged in court? Because there has to be some pathway for relief for those who are getting their rights limited. And for how long is that going to be? And can there be arbitration by the courts? Can it be brought up? Both parties have to argue their case out before judges so that they can, in fact, hear the case out and pass judgment based on the law and interpretation of the Constitution. But then if there are no answers, no reason for that invocation, there is no reason, there is really no answer, it's unfathomable, then most likely that invocation itself is, and it is not the interest of the nation that's being protected, but it is power that's protecting itself for the sake of power. The powers that feel strain and tension and a threat coming their way, to dislodge them from positions of power, not positions of doing their job, but just occupying powerful positions. Just themselves feel less powerful when they are faced with the truths, the Constitution, the law, and people exercising their rights. That means somewhere, somehow, something is not being done the way it's supposed to be done, and people are feeling it, and they're seeking ways to address it. Sometimes it's not bad when people express their views, when people express their rights, like demonstrate. It is a check to power to say, hey, you are going this way, you're turning left, but that's too early. Turn right first, and then you go left, go straight, and make your turn. So there is always the feedback. It is necessary for authorities, administrators of our country's affairs. It is necessary for them to have feedback from the people. People sometimes don't necessarily write letters all the time, emails, send messages. They sometimes get to the streets together, go out in the streets and demonstrate. Then authorities will be like, oh, okay, we're going to address A, B, C, and D, but let the people express themselves. And of course, within the people that are doing the demonstrating and everything else have to do it aware of what their rights are, the limitations of their rights, what the Constitution allows them to do. Any illegality has to be met with the relevant authorities. So ultimately, people, today, I just wanted to say that national security is there to protect the people. The security forces, the security branches of our country are there for the people, not just some people, all the people, not the president only, not the vice president only, not the ministers only, but everybody. They are there for us. That's what the Constitution says. I'm not saying it. And the Constitution exists to protect us from the state. So it's not really kosher. It's not too fair when security apparatus is used to crush rights of the people. And we must also be aware that the Constitution demands that we resist, but we should not be violent. We should resist, push back, give feedback in that manner, but no violence whatsoever. We also have, law awareness of the Constitution and accountability. Just let's hold each other accountable, each and every one of us. And I'm not only talking that we have to do this to the authorities, to the governing authorities, but to each and every one of us around us, brother, a sister, mother, cousin, the teacher, everybody, the shopkeeper, the driver of the bus, combi. We have to, I'm not saying we should police each other, but at least should be aware of what rights we all have and we don't have, so that we don't abuse each other. We don't treat each other in a bad manner, in a bad way. And at the same time, the authorities don't also have to do the same thing. So this is a very interesting journey that we are on. And by the end of it, I have a feeling that we all will be experts of some sorts. So in a nutshell, all I wanted to say is that fear not, read your Constitution, know, apply, be aware, share, because a society that trades rights for fear, sometimes it eventually loses both. Thank you for your time, for taking your time out of your busy lives and doing what you've got to do. But at least you sat down, walked, ran, exercised while listening to these few words I had to say, or many, I don't know. But until next time, take care of one another, take care of yourselves, love your country, and God bless.